The car market did not cool, it cracked open. Millions of vehicles sit untouched while interest charges pile up like sand in an hourglass that will not stop. Values are slipping faster than owners can read their statements, lenders are freezing, factories are idling, and the people who thought cars were safe are watching equity evaporate. This is not a dip and it is not a correction. It is a chain reaction that begins on the lot, moves through the bank, and ends in the driveway. If you own a car or plan to buy one, the next few minutes will decide what you do next. The lots no one visits. Across the country, there are oceans of metal and glass that gleam under sun and snow with a kind of stillness that does not belong in a business built on movement. Dealers count rows that used to turn every week and now sit through seasons. Inventory reports show more than 4 million vehicles stranded in place, and the number is only part of the story because time is the real enemy here. Days on lot keeps climbing and the carrying cost climbs with it, and every sunrise is another charge that does not care whether a single key turns. Sarah in Ohio has 2 decades in the business and says experience did not prepare her for this. She stands in a showroom that once felt like a train station at rush hour and now sounds like a library. She prints a sheet that shows $3.2 million in inventory and a daily interest meter that ticks $4,800 before lunch. She is not ordering accessories or planning weekend events. She is managing a slow leak that will drain the business if the math does not change. The mid-sized sedans that used to disappear by the end of the week remain in perfect lines, and even bread and butter compacts that were once spoken for before they arrived now gather dust. A Ford dealer in Texas reads from a ledger because numbers are easier to say than admit. 247 new units on the ground. $11,639 in interest every day just to keep them parked where they are. A monthly expense that looks like a mortgage on a building that produces nothing. He has not paid a bonus in months and his credit line is at the ceiling. He offers generous finance terms and money-off stickers that were sacred 2 years ago, and customers still shake their heads because it is not just price that changed. It is confidence. Transporters arrive half-empty or not at all because there is no rush to move what will not sell. Detailers wait for cars that do not need cleaning. Car washes in dealer districts report the kind of drop that follows a storm, except there is no storm, only a quiet that stretches from one quarter to the next. When a buyer does walk through the door, every manager looks up together and hopes this is the beginning of a turn. The buyer looks at the sticker, checks a phone, mentions rates, and asks about trade values that are falling like stones. The conversation ends with a promise to think and the door closes softly. How long can a business model designed for motion survive this kind of stillness? If the lots are frozen, then where is the pressure going? And what happens when the numbers on the backside of the market catch up with reality on the front? The wholesale freeze and the fantasy gap. Auctions that once felt like open-air stock exchanges now echo with no sale calls and reserve not met flags waving through lane after lane. Managers set floors based on last year's sheets because it hurts to admit what the market now says with every bid. Buyers raise paddles for numbers that fit today, and the two sides stare at each other across a gap that has become a canyon. An auction lead in Georgia says 6 out of 10 units roll away unsold, and the ones that do sell go to buyers who can live with razor-thin outcomes or losses they cannot avoid because their own lots are starving for the few vehicles that still move. Wholesale pricing has fallen faster than retail, and that is where the damage compounds. A truck that brought $45,000 at auction last year now sees $29,000. The advertised retail on the lot still reads $38,000 because the dealer cannot absorb the loss in a single cut. Buyers run the comps and wonder why the internet says one thing and the dealer says another. They wait. Time passes. Values slide again. The dealer finally cuts the price. The buyer checks financing and learns that rates are near double what they were. The buyer waits again. In this stalemate floor, plan interest keeps eating. Dealers extend terms and stretch incentives and try to buy time, but time is the commodity they no longer own. A bankruptcy attorney who speaks in numbers says 24 major franchise cases are on the desk and the pattern is clear. Interest swallowed the margin, and the margin was not as generous as everyone believed. Repossessed inventory begins to arrive from failed stores, and it stacks at storage lots like waves of the same make and color and trim. Banks sell quickly to recover principals. Values drop further. Survivors try to compete with lenders who are not chasing profit, only triage. What happens when the bottom of the market becomes a moving target that steps down again every time someone tries to hit it? Negative equity turns households upside down. The owner who bought in the heat of the pandemic market believed the message that supply was scarce and prices would hold because scarcity and strength often travel together. Payments were stretched to keep the monthly number comfortable, and the note felt manageable as long as jobs were steady and values did not fall. Values fell. A family in Arizona walks into a store with a modest trade and a plan to downsize payments because inflation is cutting the month on both ends. They owe $52,000 on a truck that now appraises for $34,000. The hole is $18,000 and there is no simple bridge across it. This is not an isolated story. It is a pattern that is hard to see until the math lands in your lap. Used values down more than 20% in a year and a half. Wholesale down more than 30% in some segments. Retail has not caught up and owners are trapped between a price they see online and a payoff they cannot change overnight. The dealer can bury some negative equity with rebates and longer terms, but longer terms are the problem disguised as the solution. 96 months is 8 years of payments on a machine that loses value every day. A customer accepts because the alternative is walking back to the same vehicle with the same problem and a heavier heart. Lease returns return with residuals written in a different era. The buyout price is higher than today's market, so drivers hand back the keys. Leasing companies eat losses and push those cars into the same used market that is already saturated. Values drop again. Independent dealers that live on quick turns find themselves holding units that will not move without a loss, and the loss is bigger next week than it is today. Rental fleets that planned to flip out of older units find that the exit door is not where it was and the hallway is longer and darker than they remember. Some stores exploit the trap and sell protection products at a premium because the customer is staying with the car longer and wants to feel safer. Others refuse to play that game and watch their service lanes fill with owners trying to keep a vehicle alive for years longer than planned. This is how negative equity seeps into the corners of a household. It delays home purchases. It postpones savings. It changes the job search because commute costs suddenly matter more than the salary bump. How many plans bend when a vehicle that was supposed to be an asset becomes a bill that will not shrink? Credit tightens and repos surge. Approval rates that once felt like a formality have turned into a coin flip. Prime buyers who could name their rate 2 years ago now face quotes that begin with a 9 and sometimes climb into the teens for terms they did not ask for. Subprime programs that kept older vehicles on the road in working families have retreated to the back room or closed entirely. A finance manager who has seen every cycle says 720 scores that once cleared the desk without a conversation now come back with conditions that make the deal wobble. Lenders are not only pricing risk. They are predicting value declines and saying no to collateral that may be worth less than the balance before the first payment posts. Repossession companies feel the change first because they live downstream from denial. A veteran in Texas says trucks from 2021 and 2022 now appear on his nightly schedule, and the number has risen almost by half compared to last year. He drives past dark houses and empty driveways and leaves a receipt where an expensive key fob used to sit on a counter. Banks that never wanted to be in the car business suddenly own hundreds and then thousands of cars. Those cars flow to auction and the price floor shifts lower again. Insurance companies add another gear to the machine. When a financed vehicle is totaled, the payout is actual cash value, and that number is below the loan more often now. Gap claims spike. Customers without coverage learn what a deficiency balance feels like. Scores drop and the path back to prime lengthens by years. Counselors talk to families who did not miss their mortgage and did not miss their utilities and still saw one delinquent car note erase a decade of careful credit building. Dealers lose the finance income that once made up the difference on thin front-end margins, and their most profitable department changes from the desk to the service drive. This is the point in the cycle when a market must find a clearing price or it will grind itself into a stalemate that becomes a collapse. Lenders want evidence that prices have stabilized. Prices cannot stabilize while supply grows and demand shrinks. Demand cannot grow while credit tightens and confidence falls. What breaks this circle first, and who bears the cost while we wait? Factories idle and bets go sideways. Manufacturers built schedules for a demand curve that made sense in a world of easy money and cheap fuel and predictable habits. The curve is different now, and the old plan pushes vehicles into storage fields that stretch past fences and tree lines. A plant manager in the Midwest watches trucks roll off a line built to run at $2,400 a month while dealers ask for $800 and the overflow grows. The company pays to carry and to insure and to move and sometimes to recondition units that sit long enough to need new tires and fresh batteries before they have ever met a customer. Please like and subscribe channel.